Morning and welcome to the Funded Fast Chat. I am Rochelle Butler, Energy Manager with the San Joaquin Valley Clean Energy Organization, or SJV CEO for short. I appreciate you being with us this morning. If anyone has attended the call in the past, you may have already noticed we're doing something a little bit different today. But hopefully this format will help facilitate a little bit more conversation around the topic. Before I dive in, I just wanted to remind everyone, all of your microphones have been muted upon joining the call. This is simply to minimize background noise. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to submit them using the chat box. You can do so at any time. This is meant to be sort of an open discussion, so there'll be lots of time for questions and follow-up and things like that. And now, I just wanted to start us off just by saying that the Funded Fast Chat it's our way of getting important information to our partners about, important information that will assist our partners with getting their projects done. And so we've covered the gambit of, funding and financing vehicles. We've talked about different grants and program opportunities that are available. This morning, we're going to focus on K-12 funding for energy projects. And to help us do that, we have a very special guest with us. We have Lou Jacobson, who's the director. He's currently the director of Fiscal Services for Eureka City Schools. Welcome to the Fast Chat, Lou.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Really excited to have you here. I guess we'll just go ahead and dive right in. I know that we've teased a lot about, a little bit about the ESSER funds in our promotion of the Fast Chat, but there's actually a ton of different funding out there for K-12 schools, and Lou Jacobson is our subject matter expert. Lou, can you kind of explain to us what you know about funding that's available out there for K-12 opportunities?
You nailed it. There's a lot. So, one of the things that just came onto my radar is that the state, when they passed their 21-22 fiscal budget, allocated an approximate $400 million to CARB for EV school buses. And this is going to be administered through their hybrid and zero emission truck and bus voucher incentive project. It is a mouthful. So this, unlike the Energy Commission's school bus replacement program, will not fully fund school buses, but will certainly buy down a significant portion of that cost. And this will really support the electrification of school districts' school bus fleets and medium and heavy duty truck fleet. In addition, there is the self-generation incentive program. So if you're not familiar with that, I certainly encourage you to reach out to SJV CEO, talk to them, talk to your local utility folk. There's somebody out there, I'm certain, that can help give you some information on that one. Also, there is the ongoing energy efficiency programs throughout all of the investor-owned utility territory. So you could reach out to your regional energy network folk, whether that's Southern California REN, Bay Area REN, the Tri-County REN folk. You could reach out to your local government partnerships, such as the one administered by PG&E and implemented by the team I'm talking with today. You can also reach out to varying different K-12 government program implementers. There are a few different products I just want to really quickly touch on. The first is 0% on-bill financing for eligible energy efficiency measures. You have standard incentives for replacing technologies, and of course, for a lot of the planning, the strategic work, your local government partners can help you on that. So that's going to always kind of be this benchmark service. I sincerely hope it's around for a long time. It's really great. The next one would be the Energy Commission's 0% Energy Conservation Assistance Act. Again, another mouthful. That's ECA-ED. It's kind of a follow-up on Proposition 39. For a quick bird walk on 0% financing, if you're out there, you're a school district or you're helping a school district, look at arbitrage. And what I mean by that is rate arbitrage. So if you can get this money and invest in an energy efficiency project, on-site generation, and you can buy that unit of energy for a fixed cost today, At 0%, you need to look at your utility escalation rate because that project can become cash positive from a cash flow perspective well in advance of its simple payback. So it's a new, different way of looking at the financials behind energy efficiency projects. In addition, you may have a community choice aggregator or a CCA in your area. If you do, I recommend reaching out to their program folk and see whether or not they have any local incentives available. And then lastly, it's all about ESSER 1, 2, and 3. I have to admit, from a school's perspective, mine, the one I'm working for right now, this is the most attractive way of funding energy projects right now.
Awesome. So ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So I know in our line of work, Lou, I'm sure you can relate to me. We throw around a lot of acronyms. So can you please explain to me what ESSER stands for and what that means?
Sure. In the school space, we love our acronyms as well. So ESSER stands for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And, when we say ESSER in this space, we're really talking to these three things, right? ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. And hopefully we'll have time to really unpack those three different funding rounds. But ESSER funding it can be kind of lost in this noise of learning loss mitigation. And so that phrase really emerged early, really mid last year, Q1, Q2, as the coronavirus really spread throughout, California and the country, as we saw schools shut down, as everybody embraced distance learning. One of the concerns was learning loss. And so the state and the federal government put a lot of money into this concept. And the first round was through the CARES Act. I'll come to that. But it was also packaged with federal COVID relief funds. We often refer to them as CRF, California General Fund Emergency Relief Funding for learning loss, and then the governor's Emergency Education Relief Funding. And so collectively, we kind of refer to this round as learning loss mitigation dollars, and ESSER 1 is kind of lumped into that. Now, I do want to note that the combination of all of this led to the situation where, coming into fiscal year 2021, school districts were looking at a huge fiscal cliff. It was really, really bleak. Here, we were looking at having the potential to have mass layoffs in our budget out years. And because of all this emergency relief funds, this is really just, flip that narrative. Now, I can't speak for all school districts, but what I will say is, as a general cohort, the emergency relief dollars have injected significant capital into LEAs. It's one-time funding, so it's very hard to invest in staffing. And so a lot of LEAs out there are scratching their heads and saying, this is amazing. We have all this capital. We'd love to hire staff, but we'd create this fiscal cliff. How do we manage this money?
Wow. Really quick, Lou, can you, for us laymen in the room, can you explain to me what LEA stands for?
Yes, and that is going to be kind of the technical term for your local, or for your school district. It is local educational agency. And so, for government agencies, it would be kind of like your comparison to a special district or CSD, community service district. So we are a public entity governed by elected officials, and that would be your local educational agency.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Okay, so I know initially in our conversations about this, we talked about ESSER, and it seemed like, it's one thing, but now you're explaining that it's actually 3 different rounds of funding. Is that right? Like 3 different packages?
It is, and I think everybody in the school space probably has a fairly firm grasp on this. Well, I hope so. I have to admit, I'm learning every day, but it is 3 different funding opportunities. The first one came through the CARES Act, and that would have been in the March-ish range of 2020. The next round of funding, ESSER 2, was issued in December of 2020 through the SRSA Act. And then ESSER 3 came out of the most recent relief funding coming from the feds, the ARPA. Act. And so when a school district is looking at this funding, we could collectively call this ESSER funding, but really it's three different buckets of funding that we have to manage our activities and report out on.
Okay. That is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, and just a little bit more detail on that. I think one of the things that our local educational agencies are really going to be focused in on is that SR3 and a report they have to file, and write by the end of October. So basically, to simplify the narrative, for SR3 funds, which by the way is the largest bucket of money for school districts, they have to write an expenditure plan, and that expenditure plan has to be amended to their local control accountability plan or their LCAP, and that all has to be kind of put together and approved by the end of October. So for those school districts out there thinking about using ESSER3 funding for energy-related projects, it's worth really having those conversations with your cabinet members, with your auditors, with your other stakeholder groups sooner than later, so you can get that in as a line item to that plan. And as I'm talking about that, you'll probably hear me say this again later. When in doubt about spending in this space, talk to your auditor.
Gotcha. Okay, so one other thing I have for you, Lou, is in my very limited research on the topic and, in my conversations with you, it kind of seems to me like ESSER2 and ESSER3 are actually the better choices of the three. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I would. ESSER2 and ESSER3, just their language on allowable use areas changed ever so slightly. So ESSER2 really incorporated two concepts. The first was specific language on HVAC, where you're heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and mitigating the risks of COVID spread in the classroom. Ventilation, fenestration, building envelope measures are not explicitly called out, but they're implicitly implied in ensuring the appropriate air exchanges are occurring, appropriate ventilation rates. And in addition to that, ESSER2 introduced a phrase that basically said you can do whatever you want to do with this money so long. And the key words here are that it will support the ongoing operations of that school district or the continuity of services being delivered to the students within that school district. So these are very broad statements, particularly that last one, right? And I do want to note the last one also mentions that you can effectively charge existing staff to ESSER as well. And that's going to be a really important concept, because there are two different paths you can take with both ESSER2 and ESSER3 to fund a project. So the first path is just effectively paying for that project out of ESSER2, ensuring that you can have a defensible position on why that project was critical to ongoing operations or the continuity of services. For example, if you're pondering a microgrid at your food service facility to increase your resiliency to PSPS events, you could defend that because not feeding your kids is a disruption in the continuity of services to those youth that you're working with. So you could then say, we're going to do a microgrid at food services because not being able to provide food during a PSPS event to those youth we're serving is a disruption to the continuity of services. By framing it that way, of course, again, talk to your auditors, pass it by them, but by framing it that way in theory, and for our district, we can then fund that project through this funding pipeline. Now, the second pathway, which is equally as viable, and we have confirmed that with our County Office of Ed and with our auditors, is paying for existing staff with ESSER2. So effectively what you're going to do is a journal entry moving your existing staff in, let's say, general fund unrestricted. You want to look for those staff members who are 100% billed to resource 0000, getting technical for the school folks out there that might watch there. Move that to your ESSER2 or ESSER3 funding, 100%, deal with your time and effort down the road. But by doing that, now you free up your unrestricted dollars. Now, as you know, with those unrestricted dollars, you can spend those on pretty much anything you want, right? with the big caveats that, if they're capital expenditures, you're working with your board, you're doing everything above board, but you don't have to then have that additional layer of complexity, which is reporting to the feds on how you're spending the SR2 or SR3. That's the staffing component. And then you can use the freed up dollars in unrestricted to invest in utility cost saving activities.
Wow. That second option you just mentioned seems like a pretty advantageous move. Is that really allowable for some, what are your thoughts on some people out there that might be having some questions about that?
Talk to your auditor, talk to your auditor, and talk to your auditor. And that is what we have done, because we have scratched our heads here and said, really? Exactly how it was just framed to me. Are you sure we can do this? So I would say over the last 3 or 4 months, I've had upwards of maybe a half dozen conversations with our auditors. And the question is always the same. Are you really sure we can do this? And their response has remained consistent over time. Yes, you can bill existing staff to ESSER. Once you do that, then of course the unrestricted dollars are yours to use within your standard process.
Great. Well, that's awesome. So I really like that idea of freeing up the unrestricted funds, particularly, us at the SJV CEO, we're all about energy efficiency. So just say, for example, we are able to free up those unrestricted funds, like what kind of projects would you be able to fund? And, why would we prioritize EE funding?
Sure. So you can do anything you want with those unrestricted dollars. And really at that point, it's your board policy, your administrative resolutions, whatever you want. Now, we would recommend, and this is our approach as a district, and is to commit some of those funds to energy efficiency, distributed gen, electrifying your transportation fleet. And there's a few complexities, and I'll come back to them, but by committing those dollars, you're going to drive down those long-term operational costs. And so those utility cost savings are going to drop into your ending balance. And that's going to be, effectively going to be amortizing the value of that ESSER dollar over whatever the effective useful life of the technology or investment that you're making. So yes, you could use that unrestricted dollars on short-term investments, but in many ways, I personally see this as a once in a generational opportunity to invest in cost-saving measures, operational saving measures, because as school district folk and finance folk, we know that 80+% of our budget is going to be consumed by staffing, right? And so where do we have that wiggle room to depress ongoing operational expenses? There are not a lot of spaces, right? But facilities is one. Our utility costs, water saving measures, energy saving measures, transportation cost saving measures, these operational expenses will go up over time too, but you have the opportunity right now to take action to depress those down and hold them down. And we would recommend you looking at that. Now, one of the complications I want to just mention real quickly, and I think for those of you out there working in business offices watching this, you may have seen this, there's a chance that the GAN limit might trigger down the road. And so our ability to really piggy bank dollars underneath a designated value for economic uncertainty may be minimized. So one way you can get around that, as you know, is committing those dollars. And I do just want to mention that is why I'm saying consider committing some of those unrestricted dollars to energy efficiency. So one of the things that our district's looking at doing is committing $2.5 million for solar and on-site generation for exactly this purpose.
Great. Well, that's awesome. And I think we've covered everything we set out to cover. Did you have any last thoughts or any final, last minute things that are on your mind, Lou, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think talking about what is my first step is always a good thing, right? So saying, okay, this looks great. Where do I begin? You begin by talking to your auditor. make sure you verify this with that firm. They will be the ones likely reviewing your, everything down the road for interim audits or end of year audits. So you want to make sure that they know what your intention is and that they give you kind of their thumbs up before you move forward. After that, really, I would say, if you're not in the facilities space, sit down with your facilities folk. Sit down with your local government partnerships and talk about where opportunities may emerge to maximize the value of that investment.
Awesome. Okay, and I just took a peek in our chat box. I don't see any questions for Lou here, so I guess I'll go ahead and wrap us up. I just want to remind everyone that our next Fast Chat, we will be wrapping up our 3-part EV summer series. We will be having a conversation about the California Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, and that will be on September 14th at 10 a.m. So I hope everyone is there to join us. I would like to thank Lou again for joining us. I know he's got a million things to do, and he took some time out this morning to join us and to offer that information for our partners. So we appreciate you, Lou. Also, be on the lookout for our follow-up email after the call today. We will be sharing some resources from this conversation here. We will also include a link to the recording of this Fast Chat. So if you have any colleagues or friends that you think would benefit from this information and maybe they just didn't make the call, they can also, watch it after the fact. And I believe that's it. As always, thank you all for being with us this morning, and I hope everyone stays safe and stay healthy out there. Take care, everyone.